Right, another layout update. Seeing as we've got something to talk about. Got an exhibition coming up in Tewkesbury in about 12 days, something like that. So last exhibition was like a shakedown and really getting used to like how the layout operates. So we've had a year since then and there's been a few alterations. Here I am just repairing one of these sprung axle boxes on this dogfish. Is stuck where I've weathered it, kept derailing. This one needs the spring on the draw hook relocating because the draw hook just pulls right out. As you can see, it's red and the spring has come over the securing pin. Should look like that, but we'll get that done. So yes, I'm just getting some of the rolling stock ready. Managed to snap off the steps off my auto coach, which is annoying, but there we are. Been looking at these for a while. Transporters boxes, and I wish I'd got them sooner, to be honest, because if you look there, when everything's in its box, there's a lot of fine detail. When you're manhandling them out of the packaging, stands a good chance of getting broken. B, it takes up a lot less space. So as you can see here, got rake mineral wagons, dogfish, and all customizable. Foam inserts are like pre-scored, so you can just snap them off. I've actually squeezed an extra wagon in here because when you make it, these foam inserts are double thickness, which doesn't leave you enough room for that wagon. So there's a little tip here: if you just half the size of them. 4 mineral wagons. Put the dogfish in there as well. The catfish when it's repaired. And that'll make transport getting in and out, because I must have spent an hour at the only exhibition I've done getting everything out of the packaging, putting it on the layout. In fact, people were coming into the show and I was still getting stuff out, but it's probably because I was talking too much. But yeah, getting the rolling stock together. I'm going to order another one of these for the Berry Wiggins tankers because they are different thicknesses. So this is for your sort of mineral wagons, lower wagons. Brake vans won't fit in there. They are in this one. Being slightly taller, they don't fit, so this one's designed for coaching stock, so I've got my B set in there. 3 brake vans, and still some space to put some stuff in. I've got my Mark 1 Suburban, which I might pair up with one of those coaches, but I can't remember what livery they're in. If they're in LMS, then that's not happening. Just got the cassettes to add the little jump leads to. A few more of them to do, but other than that, the layout itself is electrically all up together, and as you see, all done. There was a lot of tidying up and rethinking with the wiring, so as I've said in previous video, I didn't want a control panel because that meant everything from that end, if you had the control panel this end, has got to be jumped across each board, and that equals, by my calculations, about 1 trillion soldered joints. So each board is individual and can be operated from either side. Because you've got 3-link couplings, I figured you're still going to be running up and down if you're shunting. So what was the point? I guarantee you'd be shunting at that end and you'll want to change a point and you'd have to walk back down to this end to the control panel. So everything can be switched locally. And there's a couple of cassettes here. Now we've got these sockets here that the leads will connect into. That's the job for today. And if you're wondering why these are lower, it's because the wooden frame for the board runs underneath and they're not long enough to pass through. So we ended up with this sort of arrangement. If it'll focus. So they're setting at the top and bottom, then cross-drilled and a wire fed through to supply them. And that's just the cabling running to each of these sockets. And under here, those blocks with the holes in is where the shelf bolts onto to hold the magic box. And we've effectively just got 3 separate circuits running on this layout, one for track power, one for the signalling, one for the point solenoid. Got gauge master, capacitor, and then the WM1 adapter, which I can't remember if it comes with a transformer. I don't think it did, but I bought one. I'm pretty sure I had to buy it separate. But that has a separate AC and DC output, so one is used for the solenoids, and the signals, I'm pretty sure, could be run on either. So the spare one was used to power them. And that's what a finished cassette looks like at the moment. Just got these plugs for your power, and yeah, let's see how this operates. Hopefully be a bit more flexible than the old version, which I've still got 2 here. The issue with these was crappy wood, not so much on the shorter ones, but on the longer ones that one actually ain't too bad, but they all went severely banana shaped after about 2 weeks. It's a bloody joke, to be honest. I thought the aluminium would be strong enough to hold it, but I'll try and show you one which is bent. I mean, that's not perfect. I'll probably bin them in anger. And another delivery today. Ooh. Custom signs. They were provided by Scale Model Scenery, along with reveal. I finally decided on a name for the station. I did get a sign 3D printed, but it was naff, so I'm waiting for another one. They even give me some tea, so I'm going to enjoy that. in a bit. And I think it's KS laser. These are just Intentio and station signs. I'm gonna get put on soon. That'll get mounted to, well, ideally a bit of bridge rail, but I haven't got any. Something to look out for. But yeah, way out, GWR notice boards. That's going to go on the bridge outside the pub. I'm going to just show you changing over these wires to make some jump leads with these banana plugs. So here's the gear. Roundtech soldering iron. Unfortunately, the backlight on that screen broke very soon after I got it, but it still works. You can still see it if you squint. Liquid flux, probably overpriced, but very good, particularly for electrical work. You do not want to be using plumber's flux. Don't do it, because it will just rot and go green and manky and all fall apart. Tip tinner, some wire strippers, all basic stuff, and a wet pad. I don't know how well this is going to work single-handedly. Try and warm this up and flick it off. If I stand it up, maybe the weight of it will pull it off. There we go. Trick here, Pico track melts very quickly when it gets warm, the plastic. So I tend to find go in hot and fast. Get the heat in that solder quickly. And that is pretty much the trick with soldering. Anyway, a lot of people struggle with soldering. It's usually down to a few things. Not buying a decent soldering iron. That's 50 watt, that's good enough, but you'll find these cheap ones are like 15, and there's no power in them. When you stick the heat sink on the components you're trying to solder, your iron can't keep up with it, so you just end up holding your iron there forever thinking, what am I doing? Not having the surfaces clean. You know, you would not be able to solder straight to that rail. You'd have to polish it up, which I use fiberglass pen. There's another bit of the kit. So yeah, that's the main downfalls of people soldering when they say they can't. Not clean, not hot enough. That's the two main things. Tinning the surfaces. You can get away with not doing both sometimes, but it makes it a lot easier if you do tin both surfaces, which is basically like what we've been left with there. Solder on the surface, and all I do is add a bit of flux on top of that. Tin the cable, and it will just go together like a charm. And this stuff's brilliant because it doesn't need cleaning. Doesn't last very long though. You gotta be quick with it. It is literally like a one shot job with this flux, burns off almost immediately. So now let's get the cable prepared. Right, wire strippers. These are only a cheap pair, don't have to be anything special. Get a pair. There's no point in faffing around trying to strip them with a pair of cutters and you've got hundreds of joints to do. They literally cost 14 quid, something like that. Right, so I've just painted a bit of that flux on, and then tinning is literally trying to do this between my legs, holding the camera between my legs. Get the wire and it just runs all around the cable. Right, so the other end of the cable I've folded it over and soldered it to itself because they're quite large holes. And I did experiment with trying to solder into that, but they're so big. So the alternative is to rely on that screw, that grub screw, and just thicken up the cable by doubling it over. So now I shall install that. So remember to feed the cable through the outer sheath, otherwise, as I have done before, you put this all together and then realise you can't pull it through. Bit fiddly. You can buy these wired. But then that restricts you in some ways when you're trying to make something custom. So just nip that down. You want to gorilla it up and cut through what you've just soldered, which is what will happen on these terminal blocks that I've used underneath the layout. Right, just put that in there. Little hole lines up. Don't know why. What that does. Now I shall wiggle that down without pulling on the cable. This is the fiddly bit. Not as fiddly as the some other connectors I got. There we go. That's it. There we go. So now I shall drill a hole through there, feed the cable up, solder it to the edge of the rail, and that's one done. Right, so we've drilled a hole, fed that through, put some flux on there and try and get the cable still without knocking the camera over. And I've just bent the end round slightly to sit up against the rail. I can keep that there. Because they're both tinned, it should just be a case of heat, get it so it flows, and release. And leave it alone. Don't tug it or anything yet. Not yet, anyway. give it a minute to set, and the batteries just died on my drill, so I'll have to take a short break. But yeah, repeat that process on the other cassettes, and then we'll try these out. Right, that's taken about 15 minutes to make up these leads to go on the few cassettes I've made. Once the battery's charged, we'll get them all fitted and tested, and then we got another problem. Now, I've sorted this one out. When I made these, remade these, self-tapping screws, they're there, left a gap, then for the other end, and I thought this perspex, or acrylic sheet shall I say, would be stable, but it is quite hot up here today, and look at that. Ooh, break me cover. Boing. Well, it's not fixed. Ugh, never ends. Luckily, it did pull up. It's a bit of a faff, but it does pull up tight and straight again. Because the one thing we probably all battle with this type of system is alignment, and I am a stickler for getting it pretty good, because there's nothing worse than your train going off scene and it's jerking backwards and forwards when it's hitting a step in the rail or derailing. So we're pretty good, I think. To aid that, the rails were just tapered off slightly to allow for slight alignment, and the head also just tapered down, not much, just enough to guide stuff in. And the other issue with them was I glued it down with poly cement, which I thought would fuse them together and that'd be lovely, but in the heat and temperature ranges in an attic, it all just broke away. Probably would have helped if this surface was keyed, so got some thick CA glue or super glue if you wish. That's currently doing the job, so it's all a bit of trial and error up here. The climate this layout's in does cause us issues. Cassettes are installed, cables are in, now you can see how it all fits together. Might be changing these brackets for some wooden blocks, because I find that the cassettes catch on them when you're trying to install them. So give it a quick test. you see there, just thinned out the blade on that. That's what was happening. Where they have the step in the rail there, some vehicles would hit the tip of that blade and jump off. So that's something that's been picked up on whilst testing. And that concludes our testing. Well, that was a brief test. I've tested it more today. Going to make up some framework to make this stackable in the van, so it will be coming apart now. And I'll give you an update as we make them and get to the exhibition. Thanks for watching.